Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 164 with Andy Patch, DP of Little Bites. Enjoy.
I was just gonna say, I was looking at your website. Did you start in photography or like illustration?
I kind of started, I started in illustration when I was a little kid. So I always was drawing my entire life, and that was what I wanted to do for most of my life. But yeah, I think in high school, I started doing photography, and then it's kind of just like a natural progression. I feel like you talk to most creative people in film, they usually started from, doing something creative when they're born, and then that naturally is a progression into an actual career.
Yeah.
And I held on to illustration for a very long time. I actually wanted to do that for quite a few years, but I slowly started giving that up because I realized I didn't want life at a desk. I really, really did not want to do that because I would get calls to do documentaries and just fly around places. I was like, it's a much better lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The because I was going through it and I saw was it like a Mastodon poster or like what was that?
It was just like a tour poster or a concert poster that I did once.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
so I did some of that work for a while. Yeah, and I'm debating like keeping that on my website or like taking it down because I'm like, I don't know, is that how I want to represent myself? I think it's cool and I've gotten compliments on it, but it's like, is it even related to what my career is? I mean, not really.
I mean, well, first of all, I'm a giant Mastodon fan, so at least that part I was like, fuck yeah, same. But
Yeah, me too.
but that's a good. I mean, like, yeah, some I always end up talking about is like reels and like how much you get. Because on the one hand, there's a school of thought of like what you put on your website is what you're trying to get hired for. But then
Yeah.
on the other side, it's like sometimes you haven't done what you want to get hired for. So you
Mhm.
have to put something on your site. There was many years there where I like my reel was annoying to it looked nice, but it was annoying to me because it was like absolutely nothing that I wanted to get hired on. But that's what I would continue to get. Hey, do you want to do like the world's most low budget
God.
music video and like,
Right,
last
right.
second fashion gig? And you're like, ah, you know,
Yeah, I think that's pretty common because I feel like a lot of times people are doing work that they never show anyone, that it never goes anywhere. They do it, they don't post about it. And that's like a huge percentage of like, I'd say most of our work.
yeah.
Uh, and it's usually pretty fun and enjoyable work, but it's like not something you want to promote in any way whatsoever because I'm actually doing a job right now that I would not put on my website.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Well, and like I do a way more documentary than I ever thought I would. And it's like I love doing document. Like it's great. It's great learning about people and meeting people. And like
Right.
I'm lucky enough that the ones that I've worked on have been like kind of important. Not like in
Yeah.
the sense
Oh, great.
of film, but like with it. I'm sure I'd love to do just like a fun documentary, but like they're
Like,
enacting social change and shit like that. And
oh, that's good.
but yeah, I don't know. I guess I've done enough of them that I could put them on my website. But at the end of the day, like I would love to get into narrative, but you just keep there's not really any narratives happening right now,
Right.
unless you're in horror, and then
Yeah.
B,
Actually, that's why I'm doing a lot of horror now.
yeah, and then B, it's such a large, it's a completely different muscle, you know.
Yeah, it really is. I think it does translate though. I mean, I feel like I did actually they started doing documentaries, and that was the majority of my work for a very, very long time. And I think specifically if you're doing low budget movies where you have to work really, really fast and very, very quickly, I do feel like it's kind of a transferable skill in the sense that you're thrown into an environment where you have to think so quickly and so fast. You have to know that like you get into like you go from one scene to the next, and as soon as you're in a new location, you're blocking out, and you need to have a plan within like minutes because you have to
Yeah,
start talking to your crew. You got to start lighting it. You got to figure out where cameras are going. And I feel like with documentaries, I'm sure you can relate to this. It's kind of like the exact same thing. Like you go into a room and you got to get coverage of a scene that's happening, and you immediately need to know exactly where you need to be, what lens you want, and you got to think very, very quickly. And I do think, at least for me, doing that for a lot of years really does transfer over to specifically low budget movies because you're working so fast, so quickly, and it's pretty much the same skill set.
Yeah, the I've actually said this before, like when people haven't heard the podcast, and I'm like, oh, definitely listen to the ones where you like recognize the name, but then just go find a random one because the intent of the show is to be half educational, half entertaining, and like the lower budget guys and girls are like have a lot more to offer in terms of lessons because the people listening are probably about that level, but B, I hate that I've done A/B twice now in the span of 30 seconds. B, at a super high level, your Bob Richardsons just go, well, I put a soft light over there and really, they talk about emotions. They're like, well, we wanted it to feel really moody. And you're like, well, what does that mean? And they're like, well, just, a light push from this side. And then you talk to the low budget people and they're like, all right, well, that was a vortex pushed through 215 over here. And then that was set to 600, and you could get a little more, nitty gritty, as it were.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Yeah, and those guys always have like pre-light days. Like I never get a pre-light day in a movie. Like, are you kidding me? Which I would love to get to that point. And like the movies I'm doing are slowly getting bigger, so I am noticing thing like a forward trajectory, which is why I'm very glad that this movie that we did is doing pretty well.
The Little Bites.
Yeah.
Yeah. The trajectory from Doc. Well, fuck it. What's his name? Roger Deakins. He went from Doc to being Roger Deakins. So
yeah, and he still talks about documentaries.
I feel like the more I have listened to him, the more I realize he is like almost disinterested in film.
You think so?
Like, I think he wants to make specific films. But when he talks about any other movies that aren't like in that same wheelhouse, he's very bored or like disinterested. You know what I mean? Like, but he's like, documentary is very personal. And like these films that he tends to make are very like personal.
Yeah.
Simpler. Even like a Blade Runner is the second, obviously the second one is so large in scope. But from his perspective, he's just filming in a room with a single person. All the CGI, that's later.
And he always uses one camera too.
Yeah.
Even on a movie like that.
One camera and one light. I mean, like even 1917 with that massive fire box, or when the church is on fire. That's just, it's a lot of lights, but it's ostensibly one source. Yeah,
I've heard him talk about that actually, where it's just trying to get as simple as possible just to get to the point where you're really using, like you said, one source.
Yeah.
Extremely impressive.
I have found, I can't remember who told me, and I think I've quoted it enough times and someone DM'd me and corrected me, but was it Gordon Willis said like if you have two problems, well anyway, I'd have to I think it was like episode 2 of this one. It's where someone told me, but it was basically
what it is.
Yeah, it was basically his mentor, his like cinematography professor, whoever, was like, if you have two lights, you have two problems. If you have one light, you have one problem.
Oh wow.
And then the Gordon Willis thing was him just talking about like, oh, lighting is good. And then he like holds up a light bulb. It was for some documentary. And then he like turned all of them off and he just had like the one light, or it was like a DMX dash or something. And then he like turned that off. He's like, even that's better. It's like,
was that Storaro? Because I remember seeing that documentary in film school.
Oh, it might have been Storaro.
Where it was like holding the light bulb.
But yeah, it's like
it felt so pretentious, but it was actually a very good lesson.
Well, that's the thing that I find so fascinating is like the more and more, I think it only comes with experience where this works, right? But the more you work and the more you get done, the more you realize that what you once thought was pretentious was actually refined.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like, if you've never had like really good food or whatever, but then you eat a shit ton of food, you start to appreciate really good. Because the difference between Taco Bell and like 3 Michelin stars is so ridiculous. You're like, it's not that much better than anything I've had outside of Taco Bell. But then when you've seen all the gradations, you're like, oh, now I actually know where the expertise comes in and you can talk about it in an educated way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's why I've started, even with anything, not just like fancy shit, but anything. I'm always just like, let me try to learn about it and not immediately. Cause I was a big poo-pooer. I was pooing a lot of
in terms of what?
Just anything like popular or fancy or I grew up very punk rock too. So it was
I feel like I can kind of relate to that. Like everybody loves it. You just have to hate it.
Yeah. Still don't have an Apple product.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That I don't get. That doesn't make any sense.
too cool. Everyone was too cool, man. And then I
Yeah.
was like, nerds. And then the
Yeah.
iPhone 16 came out, and I was like, see, told you. But what was I? That was a big diversion. Oh, I was gonna say your photography. The all the photography you did was really like really stunning. And I was wondering kind of like what.
Oh, on my website or in
Yeah,
the?
no, on your
Oh,
website.
oh, thank you.
And I was wondering like what were there? Did you have like photographic influences, or were those kind of like experiments? Were those even for projects, or were those just your own?
All that stuff that's on there is personal work.
That's
Um,
so cool.
yeah, so everything on there. So I don't know which ones you might be thinking of specifically, but yeah, a lot of those. So for example, there's like a series that I did, that might be like at the top of the page. When I went to Kenya maybe like 2 or 3 years ago in a documentary, I just brought some extra lights and I just hung out there just to get some extra, extra work when I was out there. Um, yeah, so I think a lot of times on my travels, I've definitely prioritized that. I've really wanted to do a lot more of that. I actually think that I often say this is like, I wish I could stop doing film for like a certain amount of time and just focus on doing photography. If I could only do that for like a year and like really push myself, I think that'd be a really fun thing to do. But I know it's never gonna happen because I'm never gonna stop, the path that I'm currently on. But it would be kind of interesting just to solely focus on that for a little bit and see where it goes.
Yeah. Do you find photography easier, or just like more fulfilling, or more interesting?
I think what I like about it, and maybe it's just because I'm probably naturally introverted, is I feel like it gives me a sense of like calm and quiet, versus working on a set. I think a lot of working on a set is really just managing personalities and saying the
Right.
right things and being, responsive to people. All of it is just listening to people. So you're constantly focused on like what other people are saying because you have to always be soaking in what's going on around you. So
And
I
your
feel like
reactions to it. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a really good skill to have, and I'm learning that more and more. And I think that's probably the skill that I'm probably been addressing more recently is trying to just be a very good listener and really responsive to people. But anyway, I feel like with photography, that kind of cuts all that out. So if I could just be alone with the camera and just focus on just the work itself, it's very calming, I would say. It's a very calm experience, and I really, really enjoy doing that. So if I got to do more of that, specifically more travel stuff, I think that'd be a really great thing to do, and hopefully I get to.
Yeah. Do you find it's easier to talk? Do you have like an easier time talking to models than the coworkers? Because I have, every time I've had to like pose someone, I'm like, can you just do. I hired you because you know how to model. I don't. I don't know how you model. I don't know what
Yeah,
I'm
no,
looking for
I
here.
actually no, I've actually had with models, I find it pretty easy because they're supposed to be in front of the camera. With actors, it's pretty easy. I feel like with non-actors, when you're doing or non-models, when you're doing photography, like some of the documentary stuff, I feel like that can be a little bit more challenging because that's obviously you have to talk to them first and you have to like become friends with them or at least be friendly with them.
Right.
Um, but yeah, specifically if you're dealing with models where they're actually used to be on camera, I personally find that to be very easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because usually it's, if they're good and accomplished models, they really are just very comfortable being in front of the camera and they can just give you options.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't done too much of like fashion photography. I've done a little bit. I would like to do more. Have you done a lot of it?
Not photography, but I do a lot of fashion, like video. It's ostensibly moving photography.
Oh,
Um,
gotcha.
but the company I work most with, basically what they'll do is they'll just hire a photographer and then like a couple models, and then I'm like picking off shots behind the photographer.
Oh,
Um,
gotcha.
but what's funny is they keep hiring, like sometimes they're models, but a lot of times they're not. They're like people that just fit the aesthetic that they're going for.
Hmm.
And so, for instance, I've worked with this one guy a few times who like owns an agency,
Okay.
and so they finally like cut me loose and let me shoot an ad for them.
Cool.
Completely different monster than photography, and he was the main model in it. And at the end of like our second 12-hour day, I was managing a crew of four, and we were doing the entire like everyone was doing five jobs.
Right.
Um, and at the end of the day, I was like really starting to burn out because I just was hired on as a DP, and I thought, and then suddenly I'm directing and producing and ADing and like all this other shit.
Yeah,
And
that burns you out quick.
yeah, and the model, quote unquote, what just started like would lean over and be like, "What if we do this?" And I'm like, "Thank you." I mean, everyone was doing it, but to get it from his eye, and then I was like, oh, that's right. He owns an agency. Like he knows what the client's
Knows
looking
what,
for.
right.
Like my crew was giving me ideas. He was like, here's what will get us out of here quicker.
Right.
I'm like,
That's smart. Yeah, that's awesome.
so listen to everybody,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I hope to do more work like that. I feel like there's always like so much work that I want to do because I feel like in this industry there's like so many different paths you can take, and every like genre that you work in is like this, obviously it's like a subgenre. But if you're doing like narratives, a lot of times people just do narratives,
Right.
or they just do certain types of narratives. And I feel like I'm drifting into doing a lot of horror stuff right now.
Mm.
And I feel like I could do that for a long time, but I'm not getting calls to do any of sort of like fashion commercial stuff. But I kind of really want to because I think that stuff's awesome, and I'd love to do that kind of stuff. And I feel like as I start doing more movies, I'm probably getting less documentary work.
Right.
Which is probably fine because I feel like I prefer to be doing the movie thing. But at the same time, it's like I kind of want to do everything. And if I can keep doing everything and have that balance, I would absolutely love that.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to do that in this business because I feel like you very much fall into your lane.
Well, it's either your lane or like, everyone is, yeah, each like sort of quote unquote genre is a niche in its own.
It is.
And there's always people in that niche, right? So it's like if you're constantly getting horror work, your name's gonna get passed on to other people who do horror, and then maybe your name gets passed on to someone who's doing an Olay campaign, but like
Right. Yeah.
probably not. Although to be fair, there's a ton of makeup in horror films.
What's that?
To be fair, there's a ton of makeup in horror films, so there's probably some some way into like a beauty ad or something.
I would like parlay into that at some point if I want to.
Get a real industrious makeup artist to help you out.
Oh yeah.
They always get hookups, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say I've never been like a horror guy, but I'm certainly interviewing more horror DPs. But I have seen just from the outside that like in the past 10 years, I mean, horror's always been like a huge genre, but especially recently, it seems to have gone from like kind of a more niche thing with streamers like Shudder. Is Shudder a streamer?
Yeah.
They're pretty. Are they just a streamer?
Both. Actually, I just met the I don't know exactly what his position was, but he was one of the higher ups at Shudder. But they're now doing original content, but their original streamer started doing obviously just buying and licensing.
Right.
And then I think in terms of actual Shudder originals, I feel like I want to say they do like 10 to 15 a year. So they're not doing it.
See, that's great.
No, it is. It's awesome. It's perfect because you can't do. I mean, for the streaming model, it's obviously getting really bloated and going a lot of different directions, but they're being very selective, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Horror, like they're not massive budgets.
Right. Well, and the horror, like I kind of akin horror fans to like, I don't mean this in the derogatory way, but like Disney adults.
Yeah.
You know how like people, it's a theme park, but there are people who are so fanatical about it and like it's kind of their shit. Like horror fans, like the like diehards, are constantly wearing their super niche, horror t-shirt they got from a con that only 4 were made in the 80s or whatever, they have a deep knowledge of every filmmaker.
Oh yeah. No, of course. Yeah. The whole like convention aspect of it is massive. I feel like it's kind of like country music fans in a way. You still buy physical CDs. Like no other genre of music is like buying CDs like country music fans. And I feel like horror is such like a very passionate fan base. They're always buying the Blu-rays just because it's like basically merch. Like if it's like a piece of merch, if it's a movie you love, you buy the Blu-ray, buy a t-shirt, and there's obviously like sometimes action figures and like all sorts of different things that go along with it. So I don't know if that's why horror's been growing, but I think that because I think, like you said, that element's always existed. I think, because like, have you noticed how horror as a genre is getting? It feels like it's getting bigger, right?
Way bigger, and I have to think. So my theory. First of all, I have a theory about the country music thing. I didn't know that about the CDs. My guess is country music fans buy old trucks, and old trucks have CD players.
I don't know if this is true or not. This is something somebody told me once, like 5 years ago, and I've held on to that little bit of information.
Vinyl's exploding too, across genres, but those are like vinyl nerds, not genre nerds.
Yeah, exactly. Well, vinyl's amazing.
I
I'm,
love, yeah, I'm the,
it's blowing up.
I had to accept that I'm just a fucking regular ass hipster.
You buy a
Buy,
lot of vinyl.
buying records, keeping, Blu-rays around, whatever.
Oh, nice. No, I
Um,
don't buy Blu-rays. I really should.
I'm a big special features guy. Although
Yeah.
special features, I've said this in every episode, special features are dying and I hate it. But that actually does kind of
Sure.
swing me back. Well, they're ads now. They used to just give someone on set like a mini DV camera and go, I don't know, film something. And then you would get some, like, Guillermo del Toro seems to do a really good job of,
Oh, really?
yeah, like the Hellboy 2, I think it's 2,
Oh my
making of
God.
documentary is longer than the film.
Holy shit. I gotta watch that. I love that movie.
Yeah.
I
So
love that movie.
and like and you get a lot of time with like the production designers and the costume designers and the makeup team, like they really go into it and I love that shit.
That's awesome.
But that kind of brings me back to your question about like it's horror getting bigger. I think film, I hate to put everything at the feet of Marvel, but it's, we can just call it like the Marvelization of film where everything is a
Yeah.
$1 billion tent pole or it's nothing. I think that's created an environment where people who do like movies have have to try much harder to find something that isn't so commercialized.
Yeah.
And I see it kind of everywhere where like kids are going back to like 90s Jinko jeans skate punk stuff because that's not popular.
Notice that.
And it's just anything that's not currently commercialized and polished. Mm-hmm. Oh, like for instance, everyone wanted to make digital look like film because that was polished, but now no one likes polished. So now everyone's trying to shoot on old mini DV tapes and VHS tapes and shit.
I've seen a lot of that as well.
Right. So I think it's this overarching. I try to distill any of these like trends down to a more global, not global literally, but just like a global change than a like movies are doing this or whatever. So with horror, I think it's just that it's low budget, it's fun. If you're into like horror and like it's fantasy, a lot of times, you can see the creator's work. It's not overly massaged. It's like that's my favorite director made that or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and it's accessible. If you do go to a con or something like that, it's the 4 people that made the film or whatever that are there to say hi, and the actors are usually more excited. I think it just feels more. Yeah.
I think it's definitely part of it. I also think the types of horror movies that are coming out are changing considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I was never like the biggest. I've always liked horror, but I never thought of like horror as like my genre, and I still don't know if it necessarily is. But I feel like there's types of horror movies coming out there are very much like my favorite types of movies. And actually, speaking of Mastodon, I kind of feel the same way about metal music, where I feel like metal music as a genre, I would say it's my favorite genre or one of my favorite genres, but I'm thinking of like 10 bands. Like there's 10 bands that I like absolutely love, but there's so much stuff in the genre that I think is completely terrible. I don't listen to it. It doesn't even sound like the same genre to me, but to people that don't know metal, it seems like the same type of music.
Right.
Like people have shown me like these metal songs that they're like, "Oh, you'd probably like this." I'm like, "No, that sounds horrible."
Right. If I can't read the logo,
what's that?
If I can't read the logo, it's probably not.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
yeah, exactly. So I feel like I have a very specific taste. But yeah, with horror, I don't know. I feel like there's a new type of horror movies that are coming out. There's something like, I mean, it's kind of pretentious, but it's like the elevated horror, where I feel like there's a lot of social commentary. And I don't know. I just feel like they're getting probably more interesting and past just like, the straight 80s slasher, which,
Right.
It's always been there. And it's still obviously there because Terrifier is like apparently like the biggest movie in the world right now. And that's still like an homage to those old movies. But I don't know. I feel like even like with Hereditary or like It Follows, it's obviously like they're unlocking new layers of what horror movies can be. And I think that's pretty interesting. So I feel like I don't know. I feel like a lot of new directors are getting into that and like probably just exploring what they can do within that genre. Because I feel like you can do.
Well, and I feel like the slasher films were very punk rock in that
Yeah.
that was kind of, I'm making this up. No one told me this. This is me making shit up in my head. But like it feels kind of like a response to An Exorcist, which was like really, highbrow, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you get Friday the 13th or whatever, which is just like, don't fuck and you won't get stabbed. It's kind of...
Was The Exorcist considered highbrow when it came out? Because I feel like now it is, but I'm wondering
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it was when it came out, but then after,
Like when it came out, it was okay. Like after
when
it came
after
out.
10 years or whatever,
Yeah,
you
because
look
now
at
it's
that.
considered like highbrow and like high art and everything. But yeah, at the time, I can't imagine that's what the response was.
No, I imagine it was like Blair Witch
Yeah,
or whatever, or not even Blair Witch, but because Blair Witch had its own aesthetic, but just like a spectacle, like a gross spectacle. Because especially
very
because when,
gross.
when
Yeah,
did Exorcist come out? Like 70.
73.
That's exactly the number I was going to say. So we're going to go with it.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, we have the internet. Uh, but
Oh my God, it was. Holy shit, it was 73.
nailed it. Hell yeah.
It's
Um,
crazy.
but I wonder if that film was also when was Satanic Panic? That was the 80s.
80s, yeah.
But even so, they're the
It was from
70s.
like Iron Maiden and Slayer and all the
Yeah,
all the Slayer
yeah.
metal bands that came out.
But like when I'm thinking of like global responses to shit, right? You had uh the 60s were like free love and whatnot, and then the 70s was a little more relaxed. And I imagine that The Exorcist was kind of a response. I imagine, like, I guess I wasn't there, so I'm just talking out my ass, which I hate to do. But
But
like, it feels like that was probably a response to something in film or culture that was like, we need to kick everyone in the ass. I'm sure there was a college course I could have taken that would have explained all this that I didn't do half a
but to me,
decade and a half ago.
I feel like the things that are like shocking to people they I feel like over time people have like a sensitivity threshold that keeps getting raised. So I feel like if you look back at like God, I want to say like the early 60s, like when the movie and the band Black Sabbath came out,
Right.
everybody was probably terrified of them, thinking that they're so evil. And like specifically the movie Black Sabbath probably just terrified everyone. But then in retrospect now, if you look back at it, like nobody's scared of that
They
movie.
sound like the Beatles.
Yeah, like there's nothing like shocking about those old horror movies now. But like over time, things get more and more intense and more extreme. So that's when you get to like Terrifier 3, which I haven't seen, but apparently it's extremely shocking from what I've heard. And I feel like you just have to keep raising the bar.
Well, and
And
I
I don't
think,
know how high that freaking go.
well, that's so actually, I think it goes back to your point about elevated horror. I think the bar of ripping heads off and body horror essentially
Yeah.
is tapped out to a degree. Not that
Yeah.
you can't make more of it, but just like it's not new and exciting. And I think right now we're a culture that kind of wants to see something new or be shown something. And that is psychological horrors like your Midsummers or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you not necessarily a horror person?
No, no, not really. I don't seek it out, but I interview people and I either watch or skip through the film.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Gotcha.
it's a cinematography podcast. I don't have a story sometimes, but or I just don't have time, unfortunately. But no, I think people like or the substance. Like I don't even know if that would be considered a horror film necessarily.
Have you
But
seen
it's
that?
no, but I got a quick snippet of it and I was like, do not tell me anymore. I want
Oh,
to.
yeah. I
Have you
actually
seen
think
it?
I'm gonna go see it tonight after this.
Okay, you're gonna have to like add me on Instagram, DM me, like tell me what you thought, because I think stuff like that is more in the realm of like weird psychological. Because that I guess it is kind of a body horror type
Apparently,
thing.
it's very body horror from what I've heard. Apparently, Demi Moore is like naked in like most of it, but like not in a good way, is what I've been
Right,
told. Like
right.
it's not like flattering for her. And I've been told from a lot of people that it goes in directions that they would not anticipate, and they were just didn't see it coming,
Yeah.
which already is like kind of a spoiler for me because I don't even want to know that.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna say the one thing that I learned about it because it was like that made me go, oh shit, because I thought, it's called The Substance. I was like, and then you have like that poster, and I was like, are they just like injecting people with stuff? And then my sister was like, no, actually, and I was like, oh no, no more, no more.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It seemed kind of like Black Mirror almost from what I first saw of it, but I think it goes way beyond that.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing is like I hate that people keep going like, oh, audiences have short attention spans. Oh, everything needs to be in the first 3 seconds. Oh, that, they can't, audiences are dumbed down now. And it's like, but look at the films that actually don't look at viewership number. Like Netflix just canceled Chaos, right? The movie about all the gods and that,
Yeah,
like they're good. And it's like,
I still wanted to start watching that. I heard it was good.
it was good, but
Maybe
you
I'm not
only
gonna
get one season now
Yeah.
because like 1 billion people didn't watch it like the first weekend. So they're like, oh, sorry, Jeff Goldblum. And it's like, if you give people enough chance, people don't have time right now. Give them time to watch your 6-episode minute. It's not even like 25 episodes, and see what the, sort of scuttlebutt is. Cause like something like The Substance, I keep hearing people going, shit, I want to see that. Shit, I want to see that.
Yeah.
And it's like, give them time to see it. Don't take it out of the theater after a weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I have been hearing about that show and I have been meaning to get around to it. And I'm sure it's the case for a lot of people where I feel like you want to hear, you hear from like 2 or 3 people and you're like, okay, now I'll check it out because I'm getting this word of mouth. And then again, it's like by the time you finally get around to it.
Yeah.
I hate that. I started that show, was it 1488? Do you see that show?
Sure. It's like it went like Yellowstone and then like 1918 or whatever.
No, it wasn't Yellowstone. It was by the people that did that show called Dark. It was
no.
It was like, it took place on a ship. It was like pretty cool, but it dealt with like time travel. It felt pretty high concept. And I got really into it. So I gave it all 10, 12 episodes of my attention, and they canceled it right after. I'm like, God damn it, guys.
Yeah. I was talking to a writer about this at this event, and she was bemoaning the fact that we all were, that like the 25 episode season is gone.
Yeah.
And I was like, that also, not only is that annoying because, it was kind of like a schedule. It was like you had it for the whole year, you had a break, and then you had it for the whole next year, and then you had a break. Yeah. And not only did it employ people, but as a viewer, it can kind of become part of your routine and shit.
Right.
But also, like, I had just kind of rewatched Stargate SG-1 a few months ago. What?
I gotta watch that.
Oh, it's great. But you'll notice this, that like it's a planet of the week show. Every week they go to a different planet.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oftentimes it's the same aliens, whatever. But like, it's same thing like Star Trek used to be, or it just kind of, but then that means that they have room to have a weird episode where, like, because they're dealing with
whatever they want,
time and dimension, space travel and all this, like at one point the main character gets turned into a 13-year-old. Why not? Like, it's just random shit like that where it's like, that's fun. Everything needs to be so like, it has to be 6 episodes, 8 episodes, and it needs to be perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Not every show has to be fucking,
There's just too many shows as well. I feel like that's also a problem. Or apparently not anymore. There were too many.
There's too many properties. The shows themselves don't last that long.
Yeah.
Was it music? I don't know how to do this gracefully, but I did want to know, was it music that introduced you to Spider? How did you get into with Spider-1? I saw that as the director, and I was like, from Power. Yes, from Power Man 5000. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's funny. So he's married to Chrissy Fox, who is in the movie. There was one time where, so I think this was like in 2019, I got recommended to shoot a short that Chrissy was directing. And this is kind of something I was dealing with for a while, where I was shooting like a lot of like branded content, like documentary stuff. So like I had like my day rate for like going out, but then I've been asked to do narrative stuff, as we all are, as things pop up, and the rates are like incomparable. So you get asked to do something that's like almost no money. And I was in the habit of turning that stuff down for many years. So I wasn't doing that because I was like, well, my rate is this. If I get asked to do a project, I feel like I need to be at that level. So anyway, long story short, I knew an actress who was in this short, and she just connected me to Chrissy, Spider's wife. And I think this kind of caught me at a good moment. I was like, I'm sure I'll do whatever. And it was like, basically all the money they gave me, I just paid my crew, just because I figured,
right.
I don't know. I felt like I was in a generous moment. I was like, I should just, give them my time. And we did that short. And I met Chrissy, and she was just amazing. And I really loved the short. It was a really good experience. And then I think it was like the next like week or two, or the next month, she called me again because Spider was doing his own short. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll work with you guys again. So he did one pretty quickly. And then I think around this time is when COVID hit. And I think we started throughout that year, started doing a few other shorts. But anyway, we did, I think we did like 5 or 6 shorts that ended up being his first movie, Allegoria. So this was, I want to say it was 2020. So and then ever since then, it's kind of crazy because they just keep making stuff. Like they just like don't stop. It's like kind of incredible. Like that me saying yes to that one phone call like set up this whole track of like working with these guys on like so many projects. I think Chrissy has done, she did two features that she directed, and now Spider is on his fourth. We actually did another movie that isn't even out yet. We did it after Little Bites. So yeah, they are definitely on a roll. So very excited to be working with them.
Yeah. And what was the timeline like on Little Bites? Because I imagine you only have like what, like 4 or 5 kind of main locations, really. One big one, then
Yeah, I think we had, well, it was actually three locations. Timeline in terms of like shooting days.
Yeah.
God, it was 12 days straight, no days off.
Yeah. Dude, I don't know why I knew that. That'll do it.
Yeah, no, that was really tough. So we're at this house, the main location in Simi Valley, which is that house. Have you seen that house in any other projects? Because I feel like since I did that movie, I've seen it in like music videos and like other commercials and stuff.
Not consciously, but now I've got having watched the film, I have a pretty good map of it. Like,
Right. Yes, you might see it. Yeah, because after we did that, I feel like I saw it like in a bunch of things. Um, yeah, we did that location, and then we just did one day at the grocery store. So we had like a half day there, and then a half day at the bus stop location.
Gotcha.
Yeah, at the end of 12 days, we were just fried.
That like outdoor park area was probably just next to the house then.
That was outside the house. Yeah,
Yeah, I got you.
yeah, which ended up being really convenient. But yeah, it was a very tough schedule for sure.
Yeah. What was the pre-production like for that? Did you like hit the ground running, or was it very like, let's change things as they pop up?
Um, what was pre-production? Like, I remember just going to location, like walking around with the script and just talking about every scene. I feel like that's always the best kind of pre-production you can do, just physically being in the house. Because the big thing was just mapping out like how to use the house effectively, because that was such an amazing location.
Right.
So basically every room that we shot in, I was like, we got to do something here, we got to do something there, we got to do something there. Like we didn't really avoid any area of the house. We just tried to make use of everything.
Right.
Yeah, so I think when we were there, we just spent a lot of time just walking through the house with the script in hand, just figuring out where we can do things. So that was like pretty much like a full day of just being in that house with the script, which was nice because I feel like you don't always get a chance to do that. And then yeah, we didn't actually talk about movie references that much. It was funny. Spider gave me one movie reference, and that was the only reference they gave me for the entire movie. And it was one scene. It was that scene in Apocalypse Now where Marlon Brando is laying in the bed and he's just got that warm light coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
And he talked about that scene in the basement. And he's just like, I want it to look like that. Like that's what I want for the
Like, great. One of the best cinematographers ever. Let me just do that.
Yeah, I think I could do that. But yeah, just that scene was his one reference for the Monster Aguiar in the basement.
Yeah.
And then from there we kind of just extrapolated how to make it appear. It's a period piece. It's 1970s. We try to make it look as close to that era as possible. Given the tools that we had.
Yeah. And what was the decision? I was wondering, was the decision to make it a period piece just because you get to have costumes and it kind of that adds to production value and whatever, and the house looks like that? Or was it so that people don't have cell phones?
I think that was a big part of it. I think the cell phone aspect is definitely a big part of it. But I think specifically Spider, he actually, I heard him say this in an interview. He's a child of the 70s. I think he just has a lot of, like, I'm a child of the 80s, he's a child of the 70s. So I feel like you have this natural, inclination to just adore that era. So yeah. I think that was just him, living in his childhood era of type of movies that he likes.
Sure.
I can totally relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I will say I'm not, I'm a child of the 90s, and I definitely am kind of excited about all those trends coming back, because it's like, oh, I was steeped in this, I can capitalize on this one, Right. I'm ready this time. But so what was your like lighting pack? I imagine you had to be pretty fucking nimble to shoot all that in 12 days.
Yeah, super, super nimble. Yeah, obviously a lot of LEDs. We use a lot of MC Pros, MT Pros, a lot of battery power, like stereotubes. Those are used constantly in every single setup. One thing because I did another movie before where I was really struggling with just lighting people's faces in a very pleasing way, in a really fast way. Because I feel like if you really want to light a face to get like an actual really nice close up, I feel like doing a book light is always the best way to go. But you're always up against the clock, so you always figured I needed a faster solution. So because of that, we actually took an MT Pro and just kind of jammed it in like a China ball, and it didn't really fit in there right. But we always had those on standby like all the time. So I was always using China balls constantly, and I find those to be because with the MT Pros you can add I think like 2 layers of diffusion because they have those extra like the little bubble that goes on the front.
Yeah.
And then into the China balls, it becomes a bigger source. We always pick like the biggest China balls we can. That to me has been the fastest way to get the best type of soft lighting. So we're just always using those.
I can 100% identify with that because I came up with a thing I needed a big soft mobile key for a low budget thing on a street. And and I still use this. Like boom pole, like a compact one.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes out to like 60 inches, but it like starts off at like 12. And then on the end of it is like a very firm clamp with an umbrella hole, like a photographic umbrella. And then I got a 30 inch, I think it's a 30, maybe a 36-inch umbrella that like compacts down to like the size of, I don't know, a deck of cards, like 2 decks of cards. I don't know, 4, whatever, this big. I'm trying to verbalize it for people that are listening. 2 fists. And then I'll put a 2-foot quasar tube, basically in a Stereotube, in the clamp, and then the big photographic umbrella in front of it, and you've just got this nice little
awesome. I bet that works really good.
Yeah, the only issue is anything coming out back. Luckily, the back of the quasar tube is flat, so it's not kicking light backwards, but there is a lot of escape coming out the sides of the umbrella if you can see walls or whatever.
Yeah, we always have to wrap the China balls in like Duvetine because we're always trying to control it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy what you can get away with these days with like inexpensive stuff.
No, absolutely. It's pretty amazing. We kind of talked about it briefly. I was like, if this movie takes place in the 70s, we have to use all tungsten. We got to shoot it like 300 minutes out. And that just like, I quickly realized that was not going to happen. There is no way. I would love to actually try to make it look like a movie shot in the 70s. And I feel like it has that feel, but we can never go full in that direction just because of time. There just would have been no way.
Yeah. Did you see The Holdovers?
Yes.
Yes. So I interviewed Eigel. You should go back. It was amazing. You should go back and listen to that.
Oh my God. Yeah. I've read a few articles about how he shot it. Yeah.
I will say, I think a lot of those articles probably listened to our episode. It came out pretty fast.
Definitely going to now.
But yeah, his whole point was like, we wanted to shoot it like the 70s, and the perfect marriage of it was modern technology, 70s sensibility, right? So locking everything off, not using tungsten necessarily, but the style of lighting, the style of modifiers,
style of lighting. Yeah, of course.
Not using off-speed white balances,
right?
Leaving everything at tungsten wear, which I'm pretty sure he did. I can't quite remember, but shot digital, shot with LEDs. Because they found that 5219 film stock is too clean, so they would have to go back and dirty it up anyway.
Yeah, it's crazy
because it's made to be scanned.
Right.
So he's like, if we're just going to scan it in to fuck it up, let's just film digital. What's the point? Like,
yeah, I heard that they added like gate weave.
But yeah, everything. Gate weave, halation, grain.
Right.
They did a pretty impressive film emulation model.
Yeah, because I feel like I see stuff like that just like on YouTube because there's a lot of options for that now. Like I use do you know Dehancer? It's like the most I use that one a lot, and it's really, really good. But I also feel like sometimes when I see it used, it feels very effecty. So whatever they did, it was just like the perfect amount. Like it was done so tastefully. Like I was so surprised to find out the movie was actually shot on the Mini. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I think the issue with I think the reason it works there is because it fits the sensibility of the thing. And I also think that one issue with a lot of the younger creators using stuff like Dehancer or Filmbox or whatever, is they're just clicking all the boxes, and just going like, it's an effect for them, and it's not, they don't have a frame of reference for what that should look like. And for instance, halation is something that's bothered the shit out of me recently. Cinestill comes out with their films, they pull the remjet off the 5219 and then they sell it, which means that you get these crazy red highlights all the time. So people are constantly going to gas stations at night, taking photos of, Yeah, and they get these big red blooms. So when they go off and make their videos, they're adding all this crazy halation. I'm like, halation is a failure of the film, not a feature. And so by you expanding it, it looks fake.
Right.
So the gate weave thing, they're really going for it. But I think the big one with something like the Holdovers was like I think there was more effect on the titles.
Yeah.
So you noticed that the titles were going, but the actual image was pretty.
Yeah, because they didn't have any gate weave on the actual image. They probably had like some.
I imagine there was a little, yeah.
Yeah. God, yeah, they did such a good job.
Yeah.
Whoever did like that whole, I need to watch your podcast to learn more about that. But yeah, that post process was mind blowing.
I will say he had been asked. So I was interviewing Eigel, my friend who shot it, and I was like, well, okay. At the beginning, I think he said like everyone keeps asking about that, and the colorist was just like cagey or something, but not in a bad way. But I go, so how'd you do it? And he goes, well, just did it really well. Yeah, the colorist. He mentions their name. I can't remember who it was, but they knocked it out of the park. But I think it does have to do because I mean, I'm sure you've noticed when you shoot something amazingly, the colorist makes it shine. When you shoot something okay, the colorist makes it better.
Yeah.
So I think it's the marriage of intent that makes anything like that really work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for this film, I basically colored it myself, and I really wish we actually had to go to post house just to get sort of the final thumbs up, just to make sure the pipeline, just to make sure everything would basically essentially work on all screens, which is one thing that I'm not too knowledgeable about. But yeah, I would have loved to have gotten like a full sit down with a colorist and just done that whole process.
So were you using anything outside of Resolve, like any additional plugins, or like what was your kind of workflow for coloring it yourself?
Basically everything I did was I tried Dehancer. We kind of agreed that was like going too far because I feel like it was a little too on the nose because it was again like,
resource intensive.
What's that?
It's resource intensive too. When you operate under it, your whole computer slows down like crazy.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. I was like, I don't know if this can actually, I don't know if we can do this for the entire movie. I think it's like way too ambitious.
Yeah.
But there were some looks that we liked, but yeah, just going through DaVinci Resolve and just doing some pretty basic. Thankfully, I feel like that location, it was such a blessing because I feel like everywhere we shot, it just looked so incredible that I feel like so much of my job was so much easier just because we're in this amazing location. So I feel like when it came to actual color correction, I just feel like any direction I took it was the right direction. It would be hard to mess it up.
Yeah. Did you make like a shooting let beforehand, or like were you just doing kind of the normal? What did you shoot on, Alexa?
Yeah, I shot Alexa Mini, Super Speeds Mark II, and then what did I use? I think it was an 1/8 HPM.
Nice. Yeah. I prefer that over the fucking black Promise. I hate seeing a black Promise on anything. Get it out of here.
You have a really strong opinion on Black Promise?
I do.
Really? Wow.
They have
all the strengths, or just Black Promise in general?
All the strengths, but only because of how much of a cudgel it has become.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'll put a black but it does. It also, the biggest issue for me, and this was Ellen Curris said it to me, and I've stolen it from her. And as she said, it's the same reason she doesn't like full grid. And now that I see that, I'm like, God, she's so right. This is why I like highlight instead of instead of a thicker diffusion for like sun or whatever, is black Promist, regular Promist, whatever. Full grid has no sensibility. It's just fuzzy. It just is. So it's like you're not making a decision. You're just saying, I want it to be soft, and then kind of covering your eyes, And
right.
The Hollywood Blackmagic does a much better job of like keeping it looking like it. A black Promise looks like an effect.
Yeah, I think I haven't really done a side by side, so I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it. It's just one of those things where I instinctually thought it looked better, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah, it really does. But I don't really use a lot of filters ever, to be honest, because I know there's obviously so many filters out there, and there's also a plugin now too that emulates
Scatter.
Scatterbox. Yeah, I
bought it's perfect.
It. Yes, so you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought it. I was like, I think this is something that I definitely want to try. Um, the
Messerschmitt.
what's that?
Messerschmitt told me about it when he used it on the Killer, and he's like, yeah, we tested it and it matched perfectly. So fuck it, we're
Oh,
using
really?
that.
What kind of filtration did they use?
I don't know.
Or in post, like post filtration, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think he said. He just said we put scatter on it,
Oh, gotcha.
and they dialed in the strengths, and they were like art directing where there would be, because in the Killer at one point he goes to like Miami, so they probably used like a smoke or like a fog or something, to really like bang it on.
Oh,
Maybe
right.
a regular pro mist, but
Oh, wow.
um, I'm supposed to write an article about it, which is how I got a copy of it. Um, but I've just been using it on everything so much. Like, it's like
Oh,
it's such a great way to just, and then sometimes you don't want it. So you're like, I don't want it on this one.
right, right.
Um,
I want to try using it more. Like I said, I did get it, but I don't often find myself using filtration. And I think I don't know, like in the context of like doing a movie, I feel like you want to show the director what they're gonna get. And so doing it on set, because also I feel like you do lose control in post a
right. Well,
little.
I tend to color all my
But
own shit as well.
yeah.
So I'm always
I
thinking
don't always
about,
get to.
well, no one does, right? But
Yeah.
when you're this low budget, you get to do it yourself. But I'm always thinking of like, what is this? I'll make like a shooting LUT that's roughly what it's going to look like. Throw that in the camera, and then you can do all the textural stuff in post later, because they're watching it on like a 5-inch or a 7-inch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're not going to see the bloom necessarily until you get them on an iPad or like on a laptop, and you're like, look, I added the bloom.
So do you normally make your LUTs before you start production or like after day one or two?
So I have not been put on anything where it required me to have a set look, but
Yeah.
I have worked on my like color. I have like 3 or 4 like looks that are mine, I guess.
Mhm.
And I have those 4 LUTs ready to roll.
Nice.
And then I'll kind of like just pick one that feels right for whatever we're shooting. And then that LUT is associated with a whole node tree
Mhm.
in Resolve, that then when I go to color it, then it gets all finessed,
Gotcha.
which I don't know if that's the best solution, but because I'm the colorist, it's fine.
Yeah. So you know what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But were you that was oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say I feel like I've been in situations where as I'm shooting, then I want to like develop a LUT because I'm kind of developing the look as I go. Like
Yeah.
I have an idea like what I'm gonna do going into it, but I feel like it's not until like day one or two where I want to like spend the time and like set it for the rest of the film. And I've done projects with DITs where they ask me if I was shooting a lot. I'm like, I have LUTs that I like, but I feel like I want to start shooting first, which I don't know if that's a good thing to do or not, but I feel like that's been my experience.
I can't recommend it. I was literally about to say I do the same thing where I will, if it's like a fast shoot, I just
Yeah.
throw on the regular 709 in the camera
Right.
and then just make it look good there. And because I know I can pull it together, I know I can do it. But like
Yeah.
when you have the shooting LUT ready to go, this is why pre-production is great, right? But no one ever lets you do camera tests at this budget.
Yeah.
When you have the shooting LUT, you know for a fact when like that's actually going to be in the shadows and looks good, and that highlight's not blown, because then you throw the LUT on everything and it looks exactly the way you want. The colorist doesn't have to do a lot. When you don't have the LUT, whether you're the colorist or not, now you're sitting there and having to massage each clip to actually fit where your mind wanted it, and depending on the size of the production, that can
Right.
be too time consuming.
Right. Are you normally working with like the same? Oh, you're doing all your colors, so you're never working with a colorist at DIT.
Right. Well,
Okay.
that's not true. On all the documentary stuff, I'm not the colors, but luckily they said, "Hey, just shoot with the 709 LUT," and I went, "Oh, great."
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of times, what I do is, and this always is really, I mean, directors always love it. Where like after day one of shooting, like I always bring all the footage in. Like I'll get my own copy.
Yep.
I'll spend like 40 minutes to an hour just going through DaVinci and just getting stills and grading all my stuff.
I do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and like I feel like it's really good for the project because you show up the next day and it's like you just show everyone on your phone, like, and people get excited.
Yep.
And there's been like a day or two where like I show up and like I didn't do that because I was so exhausted. Like I just had no time to do it. And actually, Christy inspired me to be like, "So, do you have any photos to show us today?" And I'm like, "Sorry, I didn't have the time to do it." But I feel like that's something I do, like where as I'm working, I'm developing basically the look as I go, which
Yeah.
I wish I had more time to do the camera test. I wish I had more time to develop it with the colorist. But I feel like just out of the nature of necessity, I have a general idea of where I know it's gonna go, and then I'm just working on it as we're shooting the entire time.
Right. So in that process with Little Bites, you were basically just operating under the 709, the RE like 709 LUT, or like a color space transform, and then just
Yeah, I did have a LUT after day 2 or 3, but then I just kept it on the 709 LUT.
yeah. Do you this is gonna, how nerdy are you? Because I can actually go deep on this.
In terms of LUTs, I'm not sure.
No, not LUTs, but just like in Resolve, like
I actually, so I spent a lot of time in Resolve. I don't think I'm particularly well versed in it. I I mean, you can see how far we can go with this because I would love to hear what you have to say.
well, I was gonna wonder like what everyone always goes like, how many nodes do you use? I'm like, it's not about the number of nodes, it's about like the order of operations and like what tools. I find I have
Oh, like the output and all that.
not even that, just like I have found that I did the classic like bell curve of like not knowing anything, doing way too fucking much, and now it's
Oh,
like way
gotcha.
simpler. I do everything in what's ostensibly for very specific nodes. And then
Gotcha.
there's like a bunch of other shit that's like, for edge cases or textural, like grain or like lens emulation or like whatever. Um but yeah, what
I'm sorry, what you said?
I was just gonna say, what are the tools that you kind of lean on in it?
Oh, I was gonna say actually, like I bought a few, like on what you were saying about the nose. I actually bought a few power grades that I thought looked really good, and I downloaded them. And just like as you click on them, obviously applies every single node to your
Yeah.
image. And there's one that I really liked the way that it looked, but it had like 30 nodes or something. And I was like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing
No.
with all my own footage? Because I never do that. Like I just have one for exposure, one for denoising, one for shadows and highlights, and one for color.
Well,
And it's like very simple. And I I, I mean, how many are you say you're also typically using four?
no. Well, so my general node tree right now is I think like 27,
Oh, that's a
but
lot.
but not all of them are being used. So node
Oh,
trees are for organization, not
right.
for, more is better or worse or whatever. So like when I have, it's the same layout every time, and then just the stuff, the modifiers inside it change, so to speak,
Right.
for like those four looks I mentioned. So um when I apply it, like all the textural stuff's turned off. Obviously, there's
Mhm.
no denoising, there's no flags or windows or anything, but they're preset.
Wow.
There's no adjustments on them, but they're just there.
Right.
So if I know I need to like window something, it's just there instead of me like
Oh, gotcha.
starting a new node and then like figuring it. It's just to
Gotcha.
save time. But really, it's like I got one node for exposure, but then that node is, so you have your color space transform, right? And then
Mhm.
after that, I have a node for exposure that actually someone made a free DCTL that I've been using for a minute. But basically, what I would do is you go into the HDR wheels and then make sure that the color space and gamma are set for your camera or for
Mhm.
whatever you're, in this case,
Yeah.
Da Vinci wide gamut. And then that makes it work photometrically. So if you're like, this is like half stop too hot, you just type negative 0.5 and it,
Oh, wow.
instead of an arbitrary number, right?
Right.
Next nodes for contrast, bunch of windows that I may or may not use, and then color density. My friend Jason Bodash made this thing called hue shift, and so
Okay.
you can not only change the hue of each individual vector, so like red, green, blue, cyan, yellow, magenta, and then skin.
Right.
So you can change the hue of all of them, the saturation of all of them, and then the density. There's a new tool in Resolve called Color Slice. Doesn't
Mhm.
seem to do as good of a job. I've noticed. I've compared them. If you don't want to be buying new shit, you can just use Color Slice for this. But Hue Shift is very good, and that way you can add density to colors,
Oh,
so
wow.
that like if you see that skin, it's like looking a little flat. You're like, it needs more contrast, but like this, it's just like I don't feel I can see. You hit the skin slider, pop the density, and it gets darker but richer
Interesting.
because saturation and lightness are inversely correlated.
Right.
Right,
Right.
more brightness and more saturation looks fake.
You say there's a plugin they use, or
Yeah, it's called Hue Shift by Pixel Tools by Jason Bodach. And then there's another free tool called Tetra that is an abstraction of something that Steve Yedlin invented, which is basically just it. I'm not a mathematician, but I guess there's I
feel like that guy is a mathematician, because I've read some of his articles, or tried to read some of his articles, and that guy's incredible.
Yeah, I really had to rewatch many of them. But someone saw, like, he did like a talk, and he showed, there was like a split second where he showed his, like, the math inside of, I think it was Nuke.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And so someone went off and made a DCTL for that in Resolve. But it's not anything special necessarily, but you're just adjusting colors on their vector in some slightly different way that Resolve doesn't do necessarily natively. And so I'll use that. Someone invented one that has like white point, black point, and then all the colors. And I'll use that to like fiddle with the overall look, like in the shadows and highlights in kind of a different way. But what I found, this whole podcast is just me ranting. I'm so sorry.
No, all right. It's quite all right.
What I've found is another colors showed this thing where if you just take a single regular node and then set the gamma to linear and you use the gain wheel, that's like more, that can set your look right there.
Wait, say that one more time.
So single node, regular node, right click it, set it to at the bottom, you can set the color space and gamma of any node. So set that gamma to linear. And then in the regular 3 wheels, lift, gamma, gain, you go to gain and then just move it around, and it'll change the way the image looks color wise, but in a way that looks more akin to a white balance adjustment, but it can use the whole wheel, and you can get crazy with it, but everything looks kind of more natural and it's like fun. So I have found now, to answer your initial question, exposure, but using like the HDR wheels in a photometric way, contrast, same thing, and kind of that little linear trick. And then after that, hue shift to dial in densities and like, skew any hues that I don't like, to get shit to match.
Right.
And that's kind of it. But then there's like 26 nodes.
Your workflow, because I feel like I want to try everything that you just said.
I can just send you the power grade. I mean, you'd have to buy hue shift, but I'm actually planning on making it like, because I need money to sell this power grade. But there's so many elements of the power grade that are other people's shit, so I can't sell that, obviously. But I've slowly been developing an alternate version that like gets,
because the power grade that you have requires the plugins they're using.
Yeah, like scatter or these DCTLs that other people have invented that like it doesn't feel right to sell something that someone did the work to do and then gave out for free.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like, it's fine because
you also did a lot of work for that to get to that point. So
yeah, but I can, my plan is just like, here's where I would put the DCTL. Here's where you can download it. You do it, but it doesn't feel right for me to include it in the zip that someone purchased.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
do you work as a colorist sometimes, or are you just only coloring your own work?
No, because of the pandemic, I started freelance coloring because I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, you seem very knowledgeable about it. I'm very
only as of recently. But it's that classic, you think you've got, again, it's cognitive dissonance or whatever. It's like you think you know a lot, and then you learn one thing, you're like, oh shit, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
So for all I know, like, any colorists listening are probably like, yeah, duh, idiot. Like, I don't. I said a lot of words. That doesn't mean I know a lot.
Right. But I mean, if you're doing it every day, it sounds like you're probably doing it a lot. So you're learning as you're going.
It's fun. It's like shooting the thing again.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I really want to get a proper setup to really get into it. I think the one thing that's preventing me from like really diving into it is having the proper monitor, because I feel like I need to get, the really good top end monitor, like the Flanders. Like I need, what's the other? There's another one I was looking at that actually looked really good. Either way, like having the proper setup at home to like really do my own footage and color it. Because I've never really had that. So I feel like until I have that, I'm still like kind of just winging it and trying to figure out what works. And
I would say the first thing to do is you can get, like, LG makes really good computer monitors that you can Ezio, EZIO, um, make very good computer monitors that can hold a LUT, but you also need a computer with a deck link. I guess they make an external deck link, but
Yeah.
that bypasses your computer's color management.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why the deck link is like the most important part, kind of. And then the monitor, especially if you're doing your own stuff, like every colorist is going to shout at me. But like if you get one of these nicer, like an LG, this LG that I use, I can't remember the model. It's a 32-inch. Costs like $1,000.
Oh, wow.
But you got to keep it calibrated through Resolve. It's like a whole thing.
Right.
But the whole point of a monitor is
there's a tool they use that actually goes on screen.
yeah, it's called there don't get Spider. It's called
one that isn't Spider.
Spider. The model just sucks. But it's the i1 Display Pro. I think Technicolor ended up buying whatever company made that. But yeah, it's like a little, I believe it's called a probe, and you rest it on the front, and then it reads the colors and the thing. And if you can get it, laptops are very difficult at getting dialed in. But if you can get that Delta E like under a very, very low number, I don't know what number you're supposed to pick, but like technically it's good enough. Not good enough, but good. But you are right. Like that's kind of the main hang up. But if, first step, get a deck link, second step, get a probe, and then work on getting a nicer monitor from there, Yeah. Because at least those two things will get you way closer than just the monitor. Because if you just get a nice monitor, even a Flanders is only going to show you the data that your computer is giving it.
Yeah.
There's no one to say that data is accurate. The monitor might be accurate, but the data might not be because of the OS.
Yeah, I think I need to do that because I do feel like I lose control of the post site so often on so many projects. And now that I'm doing all these movies like back to back, I feel like I lose control of all the movies too. Like I did one in February. I did one in February. I did one in July. And yeah, I feel like all I've done so far is I color my stills. I send them out. Hopefully whatever happens in post matches that. But yeah, I feel like it's unfortunate though, because I feel like that happens a lot with a lot of DPs.
Yeah. No, it's the biggest thing that kind of made me more interested in coloring is that like a lot of DPs that I interviewed were saying, you do everything you can, but then on feature films, it's less true because, there's a higher chance that you'll get at least a day with the colorist to like look at it. But especially on lower budget stuff or like commercials or whatever, now it's the producer.
Yeah.
Or whoever, who's gonna make it look the way they think.
Yeah.
And it's really taken a lot of agency away from DPs.
And you hear that a lot from a lot of DPs?
I wouldn't say a lot in the sense that it's like an epidemic, but it is a common.
Yeah, it does seem like it's common.
Yeah. And so cinematography squarely has two, 1 foot in post and 1 foot in on set now, which is cool, but frustrating, or can be frustrating.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. Well, I guess thanks for interviewing me.
Oh.
I think that
I don't really know how to do podcasts. Conversationally, I feel like I always just ask a lot of questions.
Well, that's how you're supposed to have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead, I ranted. Oh, you know what? I will end up with this. Why is Cher producing this?
Because Chaz Bono was in it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. That checks out. Hey, Mom.
Yep. Pretty much.
So
I know Chrissy's friends with Chaz, and I think they met through, I think it was like, it's through the horror community. Like in the horror community, like everybody knows each other.
Right.
So Chrissy met Chaz, because Chaz was in American Horror Story.
Yeah.
And so they have mutual friends, and it might have been through, I don't know if it was Barbara Crampton. Well, either way, through the horror community, she met Chaz and they just became friends. And then because of that, there was a script, and then one thing led to another, and yeah, she produced the movie.
Because I love the idea that, like, has she produced horror before?
To my knowledge, no.
See,
I don't know if she's produced a movie, at least not recently, for a while. So it's really cool that she did.
Yeah, that's a feather in the cap for sure.
Yeah. Well, I hope she had a good experience because I know they have like a ton of movies they want to do. I've already heard about 4 or 5 other potential movies. So I think they're just going to keep going in that direction. So, I mean, I think it's a pretty safe investment because, I mean, if you're spending a few $100,000 on a movie, that gets picked up and sold, that does well. I mean, you definitely make more than your money's back.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely kept you longer, but I hope it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll send you the that power grade and you can take a look at it.
Oh yeah, please do. Let me find you on Instagram.
Yeah. And then oh yeah, the film is out now, right? On Shudder?
Yeah, it's out on Shudder.
Perfect. Okay. That's where everyone can see it. I got a screener, so I didn't, I never know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it just came out. So it was out in theaters last week. I think it's out in theaters. I want to say it's today. Yeah, I just saw somebody post about it. So I think it's
wonderful.
You'd be up.
Well, hopefully a lot of people see it. It is actually, like, again, I'm not a big horror person, but that I did enjoy the concept. I enjoyed how, like, it's not necessarily about the body horrorness of it. It's more about like this idea of it happening, I was going to say something that would ruin it, but anyway, you guys did a good job, and it was a lot of fun watching.
All right, great. Yeah, it was tough. We did the whole thing with we had the crew was like 4 or 5 people. It was like unbelievably small.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. I'm very happy that we pulled it off.
But okay, actually, all right, that's how we'll leave it. What were those like 4 or 5 people? Because crew positions are so important. When I did a shoot where we didn't have an AD, that was awful.
Oh, really?
And what kind of shoot? What's that?
What kind of shoot was it?
It was like a ad, like a commercial, but it was like a narrative commercial. It was a short film basically, but it was only like 2 minutes.
Because I feel like I've been on shoots where having AD has been a detriment, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. This one, I'm glad we had an AD, but I think an AD is very much like a personality. I feel like certain people are cut out for it. And I feel like if you have a very strong personality, it is possible to have conflicts with the crew, especially if we're doing a longer project.
I see.
And I feel like when you're doing features and you're really grueling it out for like 2 or 3 weeks, you really kind of push people to their limits because it does get very difficult and really challenging. And sometimes that AD becomes a problem. So
right.
It definitely does happen. And there's been times where we didn't want to have, we want to have less of them. It's good to always have them. They always have their purpose and their value. But yeah, I've seen some conflicts with certain ADs.
For me, it was the one person I wanted to hire. I know it's an excellent AD, and it is a strong personality in a good way. Not strong like imposing, but like very like bubbly.
Oh, that's great. That's exactly.
Her name's Jessica Doe. Everyone should hire Jessica Doe. But and I didn't have her, and now I'm having to create like schedules.
Oh, really? You are as a DP?
Remember, it's the same gig I said from earlier, where I was like directing, DPing, and producing. So like now
you really are producing.
Yeah, I really felt that. That one was a real kick in the nuts. But anyway, yeah, what were the 5 that were able to make you 5 or so that were able to get you across the finish line with this film?
Gaffer, Key, and then I had 2 swings, and then first AC, and then we had a DIT. I don't even think we had a second AC. So it was pretty minimal. And actually in that location, like it kind of looks like a big house in the movie, but we're actually in this location with all these bodies. Like we actually wanted less people there.
Sure.
Well, not less in my department, just less people in general. But we did it with very minimal people. But I've been working them for a long time, and thankfully they're still willing to work for me. So I'm very, very glad about that. And they're very nice about it too. What's that?
No crafty, no PAs.
Oh, I'm talking just in terms of like my department.
Yeah. I'm saying, let's expand
of course. Yeah, we had crafting PAs and all that. I think we had, probably 2 PAs, crafty, and all that.
Yeah.
But my department was particularly small. I think we actually had to black out the entire house at one point. Actually, my key grip, Danny Valentine, I'll shout him out. He blacked out the whole house pretty much by himself at one point in like 2 hours. I don't even know how he did it.
Jeez.
He's a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to small crews. Also, those shoots can be a lot of fun as well. When you're all like moving in the same direction and shit, like that feels very good.
Yeah, because we've all done all these movies with them together. So we've kind of seen the natural progression. We see that they're growing. It's now getting to the point where they're getting more money, and it's, we're all kind of growing up together. So it's pretty nice. So I'm very thankful for all them.
Well, I'll let you get to the rest of your day. Thanks so much for chatting with me. And yeah, I'll send you that thing.
Please do.
All right. Take care, brother.
take care. But
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so on Patreon by going to frameandrefpod.com, where you can get all the episodes, and clicking the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.